Hey there, in this video we're going to begin our study of economics and some of the key concepts that tie together all of the different situations we'll be looking at in econ. Now, this video is a little bit of a vocabulary dump, but that's because there's a little bit of a lingo that comes with econ. Just like in your future career, you'll have some lingo that's specific to people who are working in your job, right? And so now that we're shifting gears and starting to think like economists, which we actually already do every day, we need to assign some really specific and professional vocab as we make some important decisions in our lives. So the purpose really here is threefold. We're going to be looking at, in economics and just in life in general, how concepts like scarcity, choice, opportunity costs, and incentives, how these things impact our decisions and what that looks like for us as individuals and in larger groups. We're going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship, and that really means when we go and make a decision to potentially make a change in the world around us or earn some money off of an idea or do something that's not been done before. How do we decide if it's a good or a bad plan? And last but not least, we'll be talking about the idea of the margin. How much effort or how much do we produce in our lives as part of the decisions we make? So ultimately, by the end of this, you'll be able to describe the influences on the decision-making process: scarcity, trade-offs, incentives, opportunity costs. You'll be able to talk about what types of analyses there are out there. That is, when you look at a situation and you gather data, how you package up that information so that you make a good decision. In number 3, you'll be able to describe a situation in which an entrepreneur might approach solving a problem, what goes into taking on a new approach to a problem. Last but not least, we'll be talking about margin and marginal utility, and ultimately what it means for us to decide how much we should produce or consume in our lives. Along the way, we'll add a few bits of lingo here and there that you'll see throughout the semester that can help you understand a little more of the external factors influence in our decision-making process. You've heard me say decision-making a lot already. That's because that's the basis of economics. Economics really is ultimately a science that studies how we make our decisions, what goes into our decisions, and how we evaluate the outcomes. Honestly, a lot of people hear economics and think you're going to be studying money, but in reality, anytime you make any sort of decision, you're making an economical decision. You'll see what that means in a second. Let's take an example of a situation that is an economic decision-making situation. You've been given a grade for a summative assessment in a class that you would like to improve on if you have that opportunity. But at the same time, I know as the student who has the opportunity, I also have the opportunity in my life to do a lot of other things with my time. I could binge Netflix, I could work on other classes, I could stand at the fridge trying to decide which snack to eat. I have a whole lot of options in my life and only 24 hours in the day. And so when we make this decision, economic principles are at play for me to decide whether or not I'm going to take the time to improve on my work for a better grade, or if I'm going to decide it's not worth it. Let's walk through that example with the 7 economic principles. So in economics, we really look at 7 key factors in our decision-making process. First and foremost, we look at scarcity and what it means for us as we make decisions. Scarcity, the concept of scarcity, as we'll see, is the idea that there's just not enough time and resources to do it all. So what kind of sacrifices do we have to make? What incentives are there for us to do something, and how good of incentives are they? What are the future consequences of our decisions? What are the costs that go into these decisions, and what ultimately am I going to get out of it? Am I able to take a second and actually evaluate my decision? And if I do make the decision, how far do I go? How far beyond the margin do I need to push myself as I make that decision or do whatever I've decided to do? Do I need to collaborate with others? In fact, how can I benefit if I actually make this decision as part of a larger group? And how can that benefit me if I work with others? So the 7 economic principles can help us make these tough decisions, such as my summative example situation. Let's go back to scarcity, that first fundamental idea of economics. Scarcity is the lifelong experience of knowing that there are just not enough resources and not enough time to make all the choices we want. Ultimately, you have one life to live. We are only individuals, right? And so that is the core of how we make our decisions in this life. If time was unlimited and resources were unlimited, we could live and make all the decisions we wanted with no limitations. But that's not the case. So for me, in my situation of my assessment, and I only have 24 hours in the day. I only have so much energy. That is always a thing. That's always something I'm going to have to deal with. So that's the first stop when I start to think, okay, realistically in my day, why is it a good or bad idea for me to improve on the summative assessment grade? Secondly, incentives matter. Even if you had the time and resources to do it all, which actually want to do it all, we need to think about our incentives, the external things that can be offered or earned by making a decision. So my time is scarce. So is there a greater incentive to go back and redo an assessment? Like, will that redo actually pay off in my grade? Is that something I'm going to spend 4 hours on and improve my assessment grade 12%? Am I going to improve it only 0.12%? What is the incentive I'm getting for making this decision ultimately? Again, future consequences are another thing to think about. Yeah, obviously there will be some sort of payoff, but let's look long term here, beyond when the situation ends, right? So, okay, I decide to redo my summative assessment with my limited time, but now, my teacher's going to understand that they need to push me, and of course I need to push myself to do a better job the first time around. So now my future consequence is my teacher is aware that I didn't push myself hard enough or ask enough for the right questions the first time around. And that's something that's going to follow me for the rest of the semester. That's a consequence. Positive and negative, that's just a consequence, right? And so we need to think and pause, what is the short-term change, right? Short-term consequence, I'll lose some time, but I'll gain back some points. But long-term, my relationship with my teacher will have changed. And so that's a consequence over time. And when we make some important decisions in our life, it's important to take the time, the pause, right? One of the biggest practices that we do in our lives is cost benefit analysis. That's when we pause and take that time and ask ourselves, what is the full list of the costs of doing the proposed decision? And what are my possible benefits? And honestly, most people miss items in both costs and benefits all the time because we move very fast in our lives. I think about, for instance, my assessment grade example and how, yeah, my benefit grade changed. Awesome. Cool. Great. But maybe I'm not noticing also that additional practice I have, for instance, in editing improves my skill set and what I automatically do as an editor in my future works. It's not obvious. I don't feel it. I don't feel my brain growing, but it is a benefit that's there. Do I take the time when I make the decision and go, yeah, I'm going to get my points back, but also I'm going to get practice in doing this skill, this revision and editing skill. And it's just going to happen naturally to my brain, which is awesome. In fact, that's what a lot of school is stretching parts of our brain in ways that aren't always obvious. Another thing, too, is thinking at the margin. When we ask ourselves, okay, we make this decision, we also have to ask ourselves, how far do we go, right? If we get the opportunity to do the decision again, is it worth it to do it again, or go further, right? The margin is that point to which you have to decide if you're going to make or take another step, go further with what you've decided to do. If I'm working on my summative assessment grade and I'm trying to edit it to improve my grade, at which point am I just wasting time in minutia, in little details, right? At what point am I spending too much time for too little payoff? That's thinking at the margin. I'm at that point where I have to ask myself, is it worth it to go one more step, one more hour, one more second, one more product or whatever I'm producing or consuming, right? That margin is that cutoff point. Food is a great example of thinking at the margin, right? Asking ourselves, yeah, like, do I eat one more piece of pizza? Another fundamental concept of economics is trade. And trade is obviously, the exchange of goods and services. But part of it is relationships in the world. We know that trade, that exchange between us as a net positive in our lives increases positive outcomes. That, yeah, we will have trades in our lives so that lives that backfire on us. And that's okay. It happens because in a net uh, look at our lives as a whole, with trade, we end up better off. So, in terms of that assessment redo, yeah, maybe I'm going to take the teacher feedback, go into my hole, sit on my laptop, edit my stuff, and resubmit it. Right? But possibly, could I go back and exchange ideas with that teacher, have that conversation with the teacher, clarify that I understood that feedback, ask for some potential things that the teacher has seen in other works before that might help me gain some perspective or some inspiration, right? I don't need to do that. I could do it just fine by myself, but overall, the more I do that, the more frequently I'm going to bump into new opportunity or new inspiration. And our last fundamental concept of economics is that markets coordinate trade, right? So markets, most people when they hear market think of like a grocery store, but really a market is any time or place when two or more people are exchanging goods and services. And everything in life is markets. The exchange of ideas, the exchange of goods, the exchange of work, money, wealth, whatever that is, right? We're all in tons of different markets all the time. And so, I think about how, the decisions I make can be impacted by the external factors on the outside. If it's, the end of the semester and I'm redoing this assessment grade, how long can I expect my teacher to get my grade back to me versus if it's at the beginning of the semester, right? There are external factors that impact that trade. Is the teacher's busyness level something that impacts how kind or how harsh they are when they're assessing me, right? That is an external factor that's in there. And in terms of the teacher working with all these other students as well, does that impact how the teacher is willing to negotiate with me, right? And so a market is not just a place where I'm buying a thing and I'm taking a thing, giving someone money, but it's the exchange of time, resources, goods. Now, when I, as an individual, decide that I'm going to take on some problem, I'm going to make some decision, I'm going to change how I do things, I'm doing so with the entrepreneurial spirit, right? That could be me starting a business or doing some new activity to improve some problem I've got going on with scarcity, right? Scarcity, it impacts every single thing that we're doing in our day-to-day, right? There's limited time, there's limited resources out there. But someone who takes on a challenge, makes a decision to change how we get goods and services. That's an entrepreneur. It's a French word, right? And so they look at problems and they try to solve them with a new solution. And by and large, in market economies, these entrepreneurs get the incentive of earning money and wealth as their solution takes off in the real life, right? So let's take a look at how an entrepreneur faced the fundamental principles of economics. There's Elon Musk. He is the founder of Tesla, coming from PayPal. PayPal is really where he cut his teeth as an entrepreneur. And he saw within our market economy an opportunity to make money, but also take on a challenging issue of scarcity, the dependency on fossil fuels. So Elon Musk founds Tesla as an electric vehicle company. And this is a great opportunity for him to develop some great wealth for himself and take on the idea of the scarcity resources. There's only so much of fossil fuels out there, and it's not renewable, right? So that scarcity bit allowed him to come up with the inspiration for his idea. The cost benefit analysis to take on the auto industry with a new concept of a vehicle is a huge cost. The research, the inputs, the human capital, the work that goes into it is huge. But he, again, as an entrepreneur, decided the benefits outweighed the costs, the money for himself, and the change in vehicle sales. I don't know him personally. I don't know which one motivated him more. But the benefits outweighed the cost for him, right? At the margin, he thought at the margin, right? When he started to debut his ideas, he produced one model of Tesla to see, right? It wasn't worth him overstepping the margin. When he came up with the idea for these electric vehicles, he didn't have a Tesla Model A, B, C, D, E, all the way through Z, right? He didn't come out with all of these at once. He thought, how far am I going to go? Okay, I'm going to debut a Tesla. I'm at the margin, and I could debut two of them at once. I'm going to start with just one. And then over time, he's been able to revisit the margin and go, yeah, let's go one more. Let's go one more. Let's go two more. Thinking at the margin is asking, how am I ready to take the next step? Obviously, his incentives, and incentives matter, is one of our fundamental principles. That wealth, that money that he was able to earn and is able to earn as an entrepreneur was a huge incentive for him. And then last but not least, markets coordinate trade, and that markets exist in all that we do. Tesla, really was only going to survive if the market was receptive to this new product, new idea really, to trade, right? So his decision, him returning to the margin to ask himself, am I going to make more models of Tesla, really comes back to him looking at the market and saying, what are people doing? Are they receptive of this? What are the external factors that are getting in the way? What are the other factors that are helping me? What is going on in all of the markets that I'm involved in? Now, this is an important part of economics, the opportunity cost, because when we make decisions, it's often a game of sacrifice, right? Thinking of them at the margin, right? Elon Musk sat there and he decided, I'm going to start with a Tesla, right? There's utility or usefulness at the margin of producing just one, but there isn't utility of me debuting two different models at once, right? So he's at the margin asking himself, is one more useful? Does it have utility? And so he asked himself about the marginal utility of his vehicle models and ended up deciding, nope, there's not enough utility in multiple models yet, right? It's not useful yet, okay? And so sitting at the margin, he decided, okay, I'm going to produce one out here. That means he sacrificed the idea of producing two different models when he debuted Tesla. And that's his opportunity cost. He sacrificed that other model, right? That was the second best one. Maybe he had three different possibilities of the first model of Tesla to put out there, and he went with just one of them, meaning his opportunity cost were the others, right? He sacrificed to make that decision, right? Just like with my assessment grade, right? If I decide to spend 3 hours on my assessment, redoing it for a better grade, my opportunity cost is 3 hours of a Netflix binge, right? That was the next best idea, the next best alternative that I had. If I wasn't faced with this decision, I would have sat in front of Netflix for 3 hours. My opportunity cost, my sacrifice, is that number of hours of Netflix that I forewent so that I could improve on my summative grade. So again, the opportunity cost is the next best option sacrificed to make a decision. Going back to that idea of the margin, right? Once we've decided we're in this, we are in this for this decision. Every time we increase how much we do of this decision, we have to consider that opportunity cost every single time. Let's take my favorite vegetable, pizza. Pizza, in the law of diminishing marginal utility, as you see here, is something that has a whole lot of utility at the jump, right? I'm starting with 0 slices of pizza, and the marginal utility of one more slice of pizza than that is very high. I haven't eaten all day. One more slice of pizza than 0 is 1 slice of pizza, and that is a great thing to have. I've had 1 slice of pizza. Do I go in again? Yeah, I'm going to go in again. My opportunity cost for that is going to be probably not having to burn those calories. Now I have to burn those calories, right? And so I've sacrificed time at the gym, or I've sacrificed something delicious later, but I chose the second piece of pizza has utility still. That marginal utility, that one more utility is there. Take a look at slice number 6 here. If I'm moving from slice 5 to 6, pizza is delicious, but 5 to 6 is that hurts. At least me personally. I'm not judging anyone out there, right? But for me, if I move from 5 to 6, I'm still benefiting from the deliciousness of pizza, but I'm sacrificing the sensation of not being in pain, right? Not having a stomach ache is my opportunity cost of going from 5 to 6. And then ultimately, there's a point where marginal utility becomes negative. That by doing one more, it's a net negative. The negatives, the costs outweigh the benefits. When I go from slice 9 to 10, I am in enough pain that pizza no longer tastes good. So I've lost the marginal benefit of that taste of that pizza, because the marginal cost of one more is the terrible stomach ache I have from going from slice 9 to slice 10. And that's the law of diminishing marginal utility. All things have diminishing marginal utility. And we'll even see that with money. There's a certain point where too much money has a negative sense of utility. The more we do, the less utility, the less benefit we get from each one. So this idea of diminishing marginal utility is a satisfaction we get from getting the thing, right? But sometimes we are producing things, and those also diminish in terms of utility. Producing, for instance, too much can diminish our returns. You can think of fertilizer, right? A farmer understands that I'm producing corn, I'm putting corn out there, and if I fertilize some, I can get more corn, and I can fertilize some more, and I can get some more corn, thinking at the margin, more fertilizer, more fertilizer. But there's a certain point as I'm producing that I am undercutting how much I'm benefiting overall, right? At a certain point, I've over-fertilized my soil. And that is subtracting from the value of the corn that I'm going to sell. And this is the law of diminishing returns. This is where my inputs are undercutting what I'm getting back, right? And so while our idea of diminishing marginal utility, taking in, as we take more and more in, we benefit less and less and less. Down here, when we produce more and more and more and more and more with more inputs, at a certain point, each thing we produce benefits us less and less and less and less. Think of the fertilizer. At some point, I'm going to burn the soil, and then I'm not going to have any corn, right? So when I look at a situation about if I'm going to make one more, marginal analysis, if I'm going to think on the margin, when I gather information, I make two different types of analyses. If I'm going to do a thing, if Elon Musk is going to debut another model of Tesla, if I'm going to spend 3 hours improving a summative assessment grade, whatever the situation is, we take two different types of analyses before we make a decision. Those are positive and normative analyses. First, the positive analysis is basically when you look at a situation, you ask what is going on, what was going on, what will be going on, what is happening, using the senses to look, to hear, to take in information. Positive analysis is, this is what happens. I am tired. Positive analysis. I like pizza. Positive analysis. There is an unemployment rate of 3.4%. Positive analysis. Call it what it is, as you see it. Positive analysis. Then we use that information to make a normative analysis. The shoulds and the musts and the ought tos. What should happen? I like pizza is a positive analysis. I should order one is a normative analysis. I am tired is a positive analysis. I should take a nap. Normative analysis. There is a 3.4% unemployment rate. Positive analysis. The government should provide assistance for unemployed workers. Normative analysis. Should is that normative side of things. And of course, when we make our decisions, we're typically doing so in a tunnel, right? We're looking at this particular situation. And in Latin, we use this phrase, ceteris paribus, that allows us, when we decide going to sit down and we're going to make the decision. We're working on the fly, or whatever the case is. I'm going to make this decision ignoring all other factors that aren't at play here. Okay? And so ceteris paribus, when I'm saying, okay, I'm going to take 3 hours to improve on this assessment grade. When I say I'm going to, because ceteris paribus, this benefits me, right? Because guess what? You don't know if an hour and a half through your work, you are going to discover that it's way too impossible and way too hard and you're going to exhaust yourself. Or you don't know that 2 hours and 25 minutes into your work on the assessment, there's going to be an earthquake and your house is going to fall over with you in it. We don't know external factors, and stuff out there will happen. Or maybe we decide 3 hours is what we need, but you're not actually as efficient of a worker as you thought you were, right? But these are things that would overwhelm us. And when we make our decisions, we're just going to focus on, okay, with what I've got here, best of my knowledge, all other things being constant, nothing else changing in the next 3 hours, taking these 3 hours to do improvements on my assessment grade is the right decision. I should, normative analysis, I should do it, I will do it, I am doing it. So ceteris paribus says, okay, we're going to leave all the external factors out, all other things held constant based on what I've got on my plate. This is it. Okay? And that kind of protects us, right? Because we can't be in control of all variables and we can't gather all data. There's a scarcity of time and you're just one person. Ultimately, when we do make that decision, when we've thought at the margin, we've weighed our costs to our benefits, we've explored how markets can help us, we've analyzed the situation, and we've decided what we should normatively do. And we've understood that we're working with only the information we've got, ceteris paribus. Ultimately, we're serving ourselves. Humans make decisions that benefit us, right? As an individual, even though I care for others, I like other people, I have a lot of loved ones, more often than not, if I'm on the fence of doing something that's going to benefit or not benefit me, I'm going to pick something that benefits me. I'm a human. I'm a mammal, right? But this isn't all bad. Businesses and markets understand this, and they see what decisions people make, like in our little graphic here with the bread prices, right? This guy understands that he can go across the hall for cheaper bread. That benefits him. He can save money, 50 pence. This tells the market that people are ready to buy bread at 50 cents, but not 1 pound, as we see here. So they will adjust their expectations, they will adjust their prices. Even though we are selfish and we think of ourselves, businesses and markets can gather information, they can analyze and look around and see what people are doing selfishly and adjust their decisions to satisfy those needs. As soon as we see that people aren't ready to spend £1 on a loaf of bread, but they're ready to spend 50p on a loaf of bread, then all bread makers understand they need to lower their price. Then they can start making some sales, and then they can start making money, and that benefits them, just like the guy who went to buy the bread. The invisible hand is that idea. As we as individuals within a big market around us, we as individuals are going to make decisions that benefit only us. It's not all a loss. Businesses and firms all around us are observing what we're doing, making decisions to change what they're offering, what they're providing, so that they can still make money. And as they adjust to us, we benefit because they're offering what we need. Ultimately, in this section, we saw a lot of different vocabulary terms, and this is definitely a vocabulary dump because we haven't applied this stuff into context except for my assessment example here. But you're responsible by the end of this for this vocabulary here. And let's go back to those learning objectives up top. Your learning objectives through this, you're seeing all of our fundamental principles and everything else. You should be able to describe some of the influences as you make decisions, like scarcity and trade-offs and incentives and opportunity cost. You should be able to look at what someone is saying and decide if it's a positive or a normative sentence. And 3, you should be able to describe a situation in which an entrepreneur might approach solving a problem of scarcity. What did Elon Musk do? How did he make his decisions? And what cost-benefit analyses did he face? Last, Marginal utility. What is that process of marginal utility? What does that look like when we ask ourselves, should I consume or produce one more? And at what point does that hurt me as part of the law of diminishing marginal utility?